Hello, this is Richie from PlayStationCountry.com and we're back with another review. This time it's for a game that we may or probably definitely will mispronounce a few times, and that won't be the only thing we're mispronouncing. So the game's called Zeroptian Invasion and it comes to us by way of Finnish publishers Ratalaika Games, and it's produced by one-man dev crew Josian F1, although he does get his friend Bibiki in for soundtrack duties. So we're here taking a look at the front end. Not much to talk about here. It gives you a rotate option, so in shoot 'em up terms and arcade games, that's the option to kind of rotate the screen around horizontally or vertically, and you also have CRT options which basically add scan lines, so it's kind of like playing an old arcade game on a TV screen or a monitor. So obviously these kind of old style retro games are really popular with indie developers these days, and that's really something that operates on a bit of a sliding scale. At the high end you've got things like Dead Cells, which it has pixel graphics and is a bit 16-bit looking, but it runs so smooth and is such a good game that it's something that you wouldn't get running on like a Mega Drive or a SNES back in the day. It's old style but not old. And then you get something like this which operates very much at the lower end of the scale, and it's just a very basic looking game with basic gameplay. And it's pretty obvious to see what the main inspirations are for this game. So quite obviously it starts out being very much a Space Invaders clone. You've got enemies moving in a row formation, shooting downwards, and you've got defensive shields underneath that get chipped away as they get hit. But later on the game doesn't really go too far away from this formula, but enemies will swoop down in different formations, which makes it a bit closer to something like Galaxians or Galaga. So I should say right now that I've never liked the original Space Invaders. It was one of the first arcade games that I played, and it was side by side with a Galaxians cab, and it was the first time that I realised that games could be better than other games, because Galaxians was more fun, better looking and all that good stuff. But Space Invaders is a series which has had some really good games in it. So Infinity Gene and Space Invaders Extreme both added like really good scoring systems and weapons and things like that, and were really good fun games. Whereas the original maybe isn't to my taste. But this game, it really kind of just sticks with the basic formula, unfortunately, and that's kind of where it lets itself down. The only real kind of additions to the basic game of Space Invaders are just these power-ups that you get. So there's three types. There's the S, which is a shield, a P, which adds an extra bullet. Now you only fire one bullet at a time normally, which is a limitation that Space Invaders had because of its hardware back in the day, but 40 years later, is that really necessary? So the P power-up gives you one extra bullet, and even though you pick up other power-ups later on of the same type, they don't add any more bullets. And you also get a speed up power up as well, which we actually had to kind of look at a few times because we weren't sure what it was doing, because you can't really notice that you go any faster, so that's not great either. The game also adds these boss battles. They're not particularly spectacular, as you can see. There's that speed up power up that I was telling you about, and so it's all a bit underwhelming in that respect. But when you do beat the boss, which comes after 3 or 4 stages, you then move on to the next set of levels, which will come in a different colour. So here's that P power up that I was telling you about. There you go, not exactly the massive firing upgrade that you were hoping for. Each new set of levels starts with one of these kind of stages, which is kind of closer to something like Galaga, where you've got enemies coming down in formations and then disappearing, come back on. Obviously I'm playing like an absolute twat there, but never mind. Because when you do die and use to continue, you just go back to that set of levels, which is fine. Bit annoying if you die on like a boss because you go back 3 or 4 stages, but here it's fine. So in terms of the pros and cons of this game, well, they're pretty obvious. So starting with the positives, it is cheap. If you're a fan of easy platinum trophies, well, this is from Ratalaika Games, who very much like to give you those. And if you're a Vita owner, you also get a second platinum, and it's nice that the Vita is supported. And look, the game doesn't crash, it doesn't set fire to your house, so that's a positive as well. But in terms of the negatives, they're pretty apparent. Firstly, the gameplay is just really extraordinarily basic. The power-ups are just so weak and awful, and I think a shoot 'em up is only good when you feel like a badass, no matter how sort of daunting the odds are against you in terms of like bullet hell and things like that, the number of enemies, you know, as long as you're pumping out lots of firepower, then that's great, but that's not the case here, you know. And whilst the game does go for that kind of authentic, emulated kind of MAME ROM sort of look, and you know, the chip tunes and whatever, yeah, it's authentic, but do we want our games to look and sound like they're 40 years old? Probably not. The game has been getting some 5s and 6s out of 10 from review outlets. We've settled on a 3 out of 10, and if you want to see more, then check out our review on PlayStationCountry.com. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Please give us a like and a subscribe, because that really does help, or at least it helps us kind of stay motivated to make these videos, which are a pain in the arse, especially if you're not enjoying the game. But anyway, thanks for checking us out. PlayStationCountry.com. Nice one. Bye.